almaya giderim. Biraz gecikecek. Kahveye gidelim, oturalım. Bazı ne var ne yok. Tamam. Vay vay. Μετά που ανέχτηκαν τα σύνορα. Κάθε μέρα είμαι εκεί μέσα. Πάω, τρώω, πίνω μαζί τους. Φίλοι μου, έχω οργάνει μου. Ως το 1974 πιστεύω, μια λοπόνα τρέβησε στην Τούρκη. Ήμουν και μέσα τους. Αλλά μετά το 1974, Έλληνες, Κύπροι Έλληνες τρέβησε στην Πόνο. Εγώ πιστεύω να μην κρύφαμε πίσω τους αχτυλές μας, όλοι οι Κύπροι. Να πούμε όλα τα αλήθεια, να είναι Τούρκος, να είναι Χριστιανός. Έτσι πιστεύω.
Φίλε μου, αυτά τα θέματα θα τα πω που την σωστή την σκοπιά. Να τα πω εγώ, διότι εσύ ήσουν μικρός, πιο μικρός από μένα.
17 χρονών ήμουν.
Εγώ ήμουν 20, μάνα μου.
Ήμουν δαμέιο, το Αρίφι που έπαιξα.
Μάνα μου, εγώ ήμουν στα γεγονότα, ήμουν 20 εγώ χρονών, εσύ 16 χρονών. Άρα, να με πιστώσεις ότι εγώ τα ξέρω καλύτερα. Διότι την εποχή, εκείνες τις ημέρες, μιλούμε το 1963, ήταν ένα χάος η Κύπρος. Ευρίσκαν τον Έλληνα κάπου, σκοτώναν τον οι Τούρκοι. Ευρίσκαν οι Έλληνες των Τούρκων στους δρόμους, σκοτώναν του. Ήταν ένα χάος. Για τον Αρίφη, το περβολή του ήταν απέναντι από την αστυνομία. Οι δικές μας όμως οι πληροφορίες δεν ήταν ότι βγήκε να μαζέψει έγκες. Οι δικές μας οι πληροφορίες ήταν ότι βγήκε να κόψει το σύρμα του τηλεφωνού που επικοινωνούσε με την αστυνομία. Περίμενε, μη γελάς, να σου τα πω.
Ρε Ανδρέα, γιατί είναι σωστά.
Δεν τα ξέρεις, μάνα μου, εσύ.
Δεν τα ξέρω.
Ben merdivenin üstündeydim tabii. Endimde aşağıya da döndüm yukarıya doğru. Polis istasyonuna doğru. Böyle ağaçların arasından bir baktım. Poliste 10-15 kişi böyle ellerinde tüfeklerle polisin kapısının içinde dolanırlar. Merak ettim nedir, ne oluyor diye. Tabii hiçbir şeyden de haberim yok. Ve Rumca olarak dedim ki benim tanımadınız mı beni? Korktum, daha ileri gitmek istemedim. Olduğum yerde geri döndüm. Geri döndüm ve süratle ağaçların altına doğru koşmaya başladım. O anda arkamdan ateş etmeye başladı.
Το συμβάντζινο έγινε όταν ο Αρίφης, ο οποίος ήταν και μες στην οργάνωση τους και άμα τον ρωτήσεις ήταν να σου το πει, επίεν η δική μας η πλευρά πήραν το ότι επίεν να κόψει πας στο στήλο. Ο στήλος ήταν μες στο χωράφι του. Πιθανόν, όπως είπε και ο Σαρίχης, να εξέβηκε πας στο στήλο να δει μες στην αστυνομία.
Δεν εξέβηκε πας στο αυτό έπαιξαν το. Με μου πεις, Ανδρέα.
Έτρεξε ρε Σαλή, έφυγε που μες στο περβόλιν του και επίεν 200 μέτρα πίσω.
Μίλα αλήθεια, είπα σου και τώρα πεις πάλι μου.
Ο αστυνομικός που τον έπαιξε φώναξε το Άλτ.
Σταμάτα.
Ο Σαλής γύρισε που είναι άλλη πάντα να πάει στη μάνα του και φάντε σου πέκες.
Η μάνα του, αερφήν του, η γιαγιά του ήταν μαζί μας.
Τελείωσε.
People actually somehow feel constrained to describe incidents of political violence in the past in their village. There is this bias, if you like, in both communities in how they remember the past. It's difficult to get a sense of objective scientific understanding of what actually happened in the village because there are issues of collective memory that come and somehow influence their accounts of what actually happened. But still, I think if you identify the two opposing trends, maybe you get a sense of the middle ground.
Σίγουρα η ηγεσία μας είχε στο στόχαστρο την Ένωση. Όπως και αυτοί είχαν την ταξίμια ολού, έλεγαν. Όπως και αυτοί έλεγαν το ταξίμια ολού.
Για ταξίμια ολού.
Ναι, και εμείς ελαρούσαμε Ένωση. Αυτή, ο νους μας, άρα ο νους μας είναι ο ίδιος με εσάς.
Ben Peristerona'da 1936'da doğdum. 63'e kadar aramızda hiçbir şey olmadı. Çok güzel geçirdik. Bir ev Türk, bir ev Rum, bir ev Türk, bir ev Rum böyleydi. Bazı eski evlerde aynen yıldız vardı kapılarda. Vardı da gene. Birbirlerimize karışırdık. Paskalya'da biz onların davarlarını beklerdik. Bayramda onlar bizim davarlarımızı beklerdi. Bu şekilde. Karışık.
istemezdi gelsin, çobanıydı. İlle bu köyde çobancılık olmazmış. Peristerona'nın toprakları karışıymış buranın. Da yeri yokmuş. Ben gideceğim dedim. Evim yerim yok dedim. Kolay değil. Yerden yere gezdik. Kolay mı oğlum? Bir kaçtık Peristerona'dan gittik Ankara'dan. Bir kaçtık ondan geldik buraya. Ama gelmeyle ev ekmek vermezler sana bir eve oturdun da.
Biz kendimiz kaçtık.
Biz korktuk böyle.
Köylü
dolaştık.
kaçtı.
İşte gecemiz çıkamazdık hiç sokağa. Onlar gezerlerdi diye.
Aramızda bir şey çıkmadı
11
yani. Hiç.
sene Angolem'de oturduk.
Aramızda hiçbir şey.
74'te geldik buraya.
Angolem'e de gittiğimizde biz sonra biraz normallaştı.
Ev yer
Sonra
yok.
gene giderdik yerimize eker biçerdik.
Gene kaçmayacaktık ama. Bu defa Rumlar gene geldi bizi bastı. Angolem'de. 11 sene sonra, doğruyu söyle. 11 sene sonra tekrar geldiler işte 74'te. Bastıhan bizi. Bu defa geldi işte Türkiye, kurtardı bizi de geldik buralara. Doğruyu bu. Yapayım. Αποχαιρετήσαμε τον την ημέρα και πήγαινε φίλησε τα μωρά του, αλλά δεν γύρισε. Η ώρα 5 ξεκινήσαν τα αεροπλάνα στο μεταδάχτυλο και η ώρα 6 εμίλαν το ραδιόφωνο και φώναζε τη σειρά του άντρα μου. Να πάω, λέει, άμα με καλούν. Η Κυπριακή Δημοκρατία, αν δεν μπορούσε να μην πάει, θα έρχονταν να τον πιάσουν. Όταν τέλειωσε η εισβολή, πράγματι δεν έγυρισε ο άντρας μου. Τα παιδιά μου και εγώ, η ζωή μου όλη, ήταν να κρατώ μια φωτογραφία και να γυρίζω τις πρεσβείες, τα εξωτερικά, παντού, να βρω τον άντρα μου. Μέχρι μάγους είχα πάω. Στα 26 χρόνια έμαθα ότι ήταν στη Λακατάμια θαμμένος, αλλά που ακριβώς όχι. Μίλουν με τις κυβερνήσεις τέλος πάντων. Είχε μια κολυσιεργία, την οποία δεν άντεξα μετά στις υποσχέσεις και ετόλμησα, επειδή έπιασα τις τσάπες μόνη μου να βρω τον άντρα μου εγώ. Μέχρι εκείνη τη στιγμή όλοι μου έλεγαν είναι αγνοούμενος. Όταν λέεις αγνοούμενος, αγνοείται η τύχη του. Μπορεί να είναι μέσα σε μια χώρα να χάθηκε και να έρθει. Μπορεί, ας πούμε, να είναι στα κατεχόμενα και να έρθει. Μπορεί να τον έπιασε ένας Τούρκος και να έρθει. Δεν είχα χάσει τον νου μου που ετσάπιζα, επίστευκα ότι να βρω ζωντανόν άνθρωπο. Αν ξέραν ότι πέθανε, γιατί δεν μου τον έδωκαν να το θάψω τον άντρα μου, αφού οι νεκροί δεν περπατούν. Ποιος τους είχε φέρει? Με έχουν στερήσει το δικαίωμα, ναι, η πολιτεία, να ξαναφτιάξω τη ζωή μου.
E 74'te ben 33 yaşındaydım.
Askerliğiniz falan?
Ya askeriydim tabii.
Ha, yani
Mücahididim.
Köy içinde yoksa yok dışında?
Ya köyümüzü savunurduk, beklerdik.
Ha, köyünüzü savundunuz.
Mutlak.
Bir de esir kampı vardı köyün içinde.
Yok, esir kampı yok.
Yani ilkokulda bir şey vardı.
İlkokul vardı.
Yani
esir
işte
kampı.
ilkokulda yani Rum esirler onun içinde toplandı.
Yok. Urum yok. Herkes tarafındaydı. Ne aldılar, ne esir vardı.
Με την εκδήλωση της εισβολής παρέμειναν αρκετοί μέσα στο χωριό, τους οποίους συνέλαβαν οι συγχωριανοί μας Τουρκοκύπροι και τους μετέφερα στο τουρκικό δημοτικό σχολείο. Εγώ συνελήφθηκα την τρίτη ημέρα, εκεί παραμείναμε γύρω στις 5-6 μέρες και φωνάξαν μας ετοιμαστείτε και θα σας αφήσουμε ελεύθερους. Είπα στην πρώτα να περάσουν τα γυναικόπαιδα, πήγαμε σε ένα λεωφορείο και είπα μετά οι άντρες περιμένετε, σταθείτε γραμμή. Και ένας Τουρκοκύπριος χωριανός μας ξεχώρισε 8 άτομα με το πρόσχημα ότι δεν μας φορεί το λεωφορείο και θα τους κάνουν κάτι ερωτήσεις και θα τους φέρουν μετά. Τον πατέρα μου αφήσαν τον στο χωριό, μέσα στους 8 και όλα τα γυναικόπαιδα, ξέρω εγώ και όσοι είναι, μεταφέρθηκα στη Λευκοσία. Μεταξύ αυτούς ήμουν και εγώ.
Τελικά αφήσατε.
Ναι, σε 2 μέρες με αφήσαν ελεύθερο.
Και τι έγινε με τους 8 που κρατήσαν?
Οι 8 εξακολουθούσαν να είναι αγνοούμενοι μέχρι πριν 2 χρόνια ακριβώς. Τώρα βρήκα έναν φίλο Τουρκοκύπριον, ο οποίος είχαμε καλές σχέσεις, ανταλλάσσαμε επισκέψεις, διασκεδάσεις και σιγά σιγά Με εμπιστεύτηκε και μια ημέρα μου είπε, αφού είσαι αδελφός μου, να σου πω την αλήθεια. Ότι σε ένα συγκεκριμένο σημείο έξω από το χωριό μας, ότι δολοφονήσαν αυτούς τους 8 και βρίσκονταν στο συγκεκριμένο χώρο, απέναντι από τις γνωστές καμάρες.
Τόσα χρόνια πίστευες ότι μπορεί να υπήρχε πιθανότητα ο παπάς σας να είναι ζωντανός?
Μέχρι σε ένα σημείο πίστευα, το 1996 γνώριζα ότι ήταν νεκρός. Πάλι από πληροφορία δική μου που εξασφάλισα, μια πληροφορία την οποία απέκρυψα στη μακαριστή τη μητέρα μου. Δεν μπορούσα να της πω της μητέρας μου ότι ο πατέρας μου είναι σκοτωμένος μετά από τόσα χρόνια. Έχω ακούσει πάρα πολλές περιπτώσεις ότι Ελληνοκύπριοι δολοφόνησαν Τουρκοκύπριους και ότι οι Τουρκοκύπριοι δολοφόνησαν Ελληνοκύπριους. Εγώ επειδή ένιωσα αυτόν τον πόνο να χάσω τον δικό μου σε πόλεμο, καταλαβαίνω και τον πόνο των Τουρκοκυπρίων. Και αυτοί έχουν ψυχή, αλλά αυτοί που τα κάμασαν δεν μπορώ να καταλάβω τι μυαλά είχασαι. Δυστυχώς αυτά όλα τα οποία δημιουργήσαν οι λίγοι, υποφέραμε οι περισσότεροι. Και υποφέρει ακόμα η Κύπρος.
Doğma büyüme Afanyalıyım, Gaziköy'lü. Belli bir kısım yolun kuzeyi genelde bütün tamamıyla Rum bölgesi. Güney tarafı Türk bölgesi ama yol boyunda karışık evler vardı. 55-63 arasında çok kötüydü. EYOK'acılar 70-55'lerde falan şu Türk köylerini, Türkleri katardı. Yani bunları çok, mesela Paşaköy'ünde Türk yerleşim vardı. Onları EYOK'acılar kattı. Balıkesir, benim bildiklerim bunlar. Ve daha birçok yerlerde Türkleri yok etmek için EYOK'a çok uğraştı.
Any struggle, in particular as a struggle like the Orca struggle, which turned out in a failure, which has never been publicly admitted of being a failure. By themselves, by saying, because it didn't achieve what it was aiming for, union of Cyprus with Greece, it ended up with a constitutional order that was highly disadvantageous to the Greek Cypriot majority of the population, which then slowly brings us maybe to 63, 64. So you have a struggle that turns out to be rather disastrous in its consequences, also disastrous in its side effects, which of course is not only the blame of EOKA. It is a complicated game in which Britain with divide and rule policies kicked in which the Turkish Cypriot community or their leaders play their own role. It gets very complicated and very messy with the right and the wrong guys. So it depends which aspect you want to stress.
Basically, the establishment of EOKA triggered serious responses within the Turkish Cypriot community, Volkan being the most important of these. And by 1957, you have the establishment of TMT, with the knowledge, at least, of the Turkish government. It was established with the stated goal of defending the Turkish Cypriots from possible attacks from the Greek Cypriots, and with the ideology of achieving Taksim, or partition of the island. That was the ultimate goal. But just as there were people who maybe fought within EOKA for noble goals or with noble motivations, freedom and the like being their efforts, there were also people within TMT who did the same. But these organizations, I think, also were manipulated for other purposes on both sides.
People want short, straightforward answers as to who started it. Looking for who created the first incident that interrupted a long history of peaceful coexistence is simply something that's not possible to be found. Looking for the first instance of violence and who started it is really a moot point. For the sake of the argument, let's just accept that the first killing was made by a Turkish Cypriot, killing a Greek Cypriot. From the Turkish Cypriot point of view, the Turkish Cypriots would have said, well, when the Greek Cypriots started demanding enosis, they didn't take us into consideration. So it was actually the Greek Cypriots who made us start thinking about living separately. But the point that I am trying to raise here is how things were perceived differently from the two sides. The Greek Cypriots simply thought that we are practicing our just moral right to decide for our national future, and actually the Turkish Cypriots were doing the same as well.
O kahvehanedeki olay konuda bir şey bilir misiniz?
Yok, o başka bir yerde oldu. Nerede olduysa bilmiyorum. Hiçbir bilgim yok. Nerede? Bilmem. O daha eskiden belki kimler, Türklerle Rumlar mı kavga ettiydi?
Türkler ateş etmedi bu Rumlara be.
Benim bilgim yok.
Holding kahveye daramadı mı Türkler? Tremeşeliler.
Yani arkadaşın demesine göre başka köyden gelen insanlar kahvehaneyi geçerken kahvehaneye silah atmışlar. Öldüğümüzde biri ölmedi.
Papaz.
Yaralanma oldu. Hani ölüm yok. Daha sonra da bu şeyi yapmışlar bilmiyorum ya. Daha fazla bilgim yok.
Ahla polisinde yolu kesti ve o adamı öldürdü. Oracıkta öldürdü Eoka geleni. Neden? Eoka'nın silahlarını çaldıydı. O adamlar da Rum kahvesine ateş açtı geçerken.
Konuşacaksan tam konuş.
Hiç bilmem abi.
Bak kamerada çeker. Yerli. Yerli.
Tremeşi.
Başka köyden geldiler. Geçerken ateş açmışlar kahveye. Papaz yaralandı. Bunun üzerine o ateş açanlar 2 kişiydi. 2 kardeş idi. Polis aldı bunları Magosta polisine giderken Ahna bölgesinde pusuya düşürdü kendilerine. Ateş açtı. Arabanın içerisinde bir tanesi şehit oldu. Bir tanesi de yaşadı.
The ideology of enosis, at least amongst the Greek Cypriot community, was an ideology for the end of colonial rule. And I see positive things because it was an ideology for liberation. End of colonial rule equals liberation. During the time of the Republic, the ideology of enosis was an ideology for destruction of the Republic, for partition, you see. This is why this ideology plays a very different role once Cyprus has become independent.
You have a complicated mix. You have a militarized island, you have militia going on, everybody preparing for a showdown. Both sides had not disarmed. After 1960, there's complete mistrust and different agendas. And so this conflict simmers on, while at the same time Makarios increasingly clashes with the Greek junta, and the Enosis nationalists, led by Grivas, on the island organized around the Okavita. So you have the Greek Cypriots fighting within each other. You have an unresolved dispute between the Turkish Cypriot, with Turkey backing up the Turkish Cypriots, so there's a potential structural danger there. And then you enter the crisis of 74, where the conflict between Makarios and the junta and the Okavita culminates in a coup against Makarios, ousting him of power, which provides the pretext Turkey had also been waiting for, and had been prevented in 64, 67 to invade and partition the island. So the winners are the partitioners.
Siz 74'ü hatırlarsınız değil mi? Yani savaş falan.
19 yaşındaydım ama hatırlarım. Hatırladığım kadarını söyleyeyim.
Biraz açılabilirsiniz.
Açılırım ya, serbest, korkum yok.
Süper.
Rumlar kendi kendine kavga ederken Türk köylerinde başlarlar şey yapmaya. Bunun üzerine istihbarat aldığı bilgiye göre Türkiye ile irtibata geçip zamanın en büyük adamı Ecevit onun emriyle buraya asker çıkartma yaptı ki en doğru şeyi yaptı.
For me, the distortion in the official Turkish view is that Turkey intervened in order to prevent the Turkish Cypriots from being massacred, implying that there were massacres for the
argument there is different. The argument is that there would be massacre if the coup had been successful and there had been an
But I heard also the argument that they came to protect them from the massacres, which I always found a distortion of history.
Υπήρχε μια εκεχηρία ευρωσυσβολής. Έμειναν οι Τούρκοι από μια μπάντα, οι δικοί μας από την άλλη μπάντα, αλλά δεν είχε η επαφή που υπήρχε ο Μπρίτ να έρθουν να ψουμνήσουν. Οι δικοί μας απογορεύαν τους Τουρκούς που υπήρχαν να έρθουν να ψουμνήσουν.
Δεν τους επουλούσαν τίποτε πιο. Έγινε το πραξικόπημα. Άιστον να έρθουν να ψουμνήσουν όπως ψουμνήσαν πρώτα, αφού τσίνα και είχαν μπακάλικα.
Επηρεαστήκαν από τους ανθρώπους της Οκαβίτα που έφκαλαν σκοπιάνοι στα μπακάλικα στο φούρνο.
Στεκούνταν λισότες της Οκαβίτα, στεκούνταν στα μπακάλικα, να μην ήμουν Τούρκοι μέσα να ψουμνήσουν. Είχα μια θεία, η Αντρίτσα, πάνε και αγόραζαν τα τσιγάρα και βάλαν τους τα πας στον τοίχο και έρχονταν οι Τούρκοι τη νύχτα και πιάναν τα και παέναση. Ούτε τσιγάρα τους επουλούσαν.
Γι' αυτό έφεραν την ένταση με αξί...
Γι' αυτό έκαναν και οι Τούρκοι ότι έκαναν τους δικούς μας.
Onlar o tarafta, biz bu tarafta gayet rahattık. Huzurumuzu gelip gene bozacaklar. Öyle düşünür çünkü asker olmadığı zaman burada Rum fazla olduğu için kendi her şeyi kendi yönetecek bunun içerisinde. Eskiden olduğu gibi Türk'ün ekmeğini de kızacak, para da vermeyecek. Bak şimdi ne güzel O tarafta evinde oturur, biz bu tarafta. 30 seneden, 36 seneden sonra nereye gelecek? Yani biz anlaşmadan yanayız. İsterik anlaşma olsun ama öyle iç içe artık olmaz bundan sonra.
Αν γίνει λύση, θα πάω στο χωριό μου. Τρέχοντας θα πάω. Εγώ πάω στο χωριό μου τώρα, αν θέλεις πίστεψε, και νιώχω 15 χρονών. Αν θυμούμαι τα νιάτα μου που ήμουν. Έτσι αισθάνομαι. Μπορεί να πικραίνομαι γιατί κάθονται άλλοι στο σπίτι μου, αλλά στρέφομαι και λάλλω και εκείνη έναν κορίτσι μικρό που κάθεται στο σπίτι της μάμας μου. Τι μου έκαμε εκείνο το μωρό 25 χρόνων. Ήταν αγέννητο. Πραξικοπηματίες έκαναν την ένωση, μα τι ένωση με την Τουρκία που την έκαναν. Πού είναι την Ελλάδα. Κάμαν, αφού σε μάγκες για μένα κάποτε λαλού έτσι και έτσι και αν είναι μάγκες ας πάνε να ζήσουν τη σημαία νεοχέλο τους άνθρωπους που πας στο βουνό.
Ο κόσμος είναι παρελθόντες που κάμαν τα κακά και φεύγουν. Σε λίγα χρόνια φεύγουν όλοι που συμμετείχαμε στον τα έσχη. Τα σχολεία μας, η ιστορία μας να αλλάξει λίγο. Να μην λέμε ότι ο Τούρκος είναι ο εχθρός μας και άλλα και οι Τουρκοκύπροι, οι Έλληνες είναι ο εχθρός μας. Πρέπει μέσω της παιδείας να μάθουν την ιστορία, να μου συνέβηκε και δεν είναι ο διχασμός, αλλά δεν πρέπει συνέχεια να σκορπούμε το μίσος εναντίον σε μια μπάντα της άλλης.
This was the official education we all received, and we know it by heart. But some pieces of the jigsaw puzzle doesn't really match, and some are missing. The story that place was a paradise, inhabited by Greeks, and all of a sudden in 1974 the Turks came in and started killing, ethnic cleansing and raping and taking people by force, which they did. But is that the real story of Cyprus? Can that explain to us in a rational sense, satisfy our thirst for truth? At least until the age of 17, 18, when someone starts questioning things and etc., made me and my brother start looking around for real information, not for just the mainstream thing that used to come from the schools, from the newspapers and the politicians. Because it wouldn't really make sense to us that some crazy guys come and kill your father. The very essence of my emotions when I saw my father's remains is that there was this guy in bones only and a couple of holes in his skull who was my father, and he was younger than me. There should be something else behind it. There should be something that led to these things, although that's not a justification for the wrongdoers. We're still very angry about the wrongdoers who drove our family into despair and pain for all of these years. But I believe that my family got a peace of mind after the exhumation and the identification of the remains and the funeral, even if it was delayed for 40 years. With a question mark, of course, that we don't know what happened to them and how and when and by whom, which is still an issue that we are after.
We're really trying to promote the kind of historical curiosity that's been lacking in Cyprus regarding the intercommunal relations, but also the history of Cyprus itself. So what we want to create is the opportunity for people to ask new questions based on information that wasn't necessarily readily available before.
Nobody knows what has happened exactly at that morning, but what we have learned from the surviving people is that some people from neighbor village came, called my family out, got into the buses and taken a few miles away from the village. My father, he couldn't find that courage to inform me that all your brothers, sisters, your mom, your grandma, I have about 30 people that were related, relatives that I lost here in 3 villages. At the end of the day, the truth should come out. What happened, how it happened, perhaps under which conditions it happened. Those who committed those crimes should be punished. My feeling at this point is that if the punishment or if the seeking of this punishment would be a hindrance and in our main aim of
building the trust, forming the peace, and reuniting this country, then I can give up of this punishment.
It's very difficult for researchers to gather information about specific events. It's difficult for them to gather information from the different kinds of sources available. The archive isn't trying to break up any particular narratives. In other words, the archive isn't aimed at even breaking down dominant discourses on both sides of the island. What it's aimed at is allowing us to contextualize those narratives in different ways, to give us a broader picture of what's happened that won't be divisive in the way and perpetuate conflict in the way that until now histories in Cyprus have.
Sometimes when I teach, one of the things I do when I discuss with Greek Cypriot students of mine is that I show them images from Cyprus, and I tell them what are they showing, these images. And they show people in tents, and they show people who have been killed, and they show women in black weeping. And when I ask them, what do these images show? All of them say, oh, they show the Greek Cypriot refugees, the Greek Cypriots who are missing, the mothers of the missing. And I tell them, well, actually they're not. They're actually Turkish Cypriots. So it's Turkish Cypriot refugees, etc., etc. And that immediately makes them understand that something is wrong, and that the two sides may have shared the same experience, yet each side is unaware of this.
Wherever you have ethnic conflict, you have what is called egoism or victimization. This is group loyalty. It holds you together. It's part of it's the core myth that you are the victim. And even your own atrocities are excused by the crimes and atrocities of the other. It's a human reflex. That's, I think, a global phenomenon with variations. But if you read literature about ethnic conflict, that pops up all the time.
Each side is screaming. It's not trying to talk to the other side. It uses an iconography of pain, and it's a scream of pain and despair because they feel that the other side does not acknowledge their pain, but also because they want to be heard louder by third parties. They want to kind of drown out the voice of the other. They want to say, we suffered more. And this actually also holds true for what is happening inside each side, because again there was intra-ethnic violence between people of the same community that has not been acknowledged. This is again what creates these deeply polarized historical viewpoints and makes it impossible to create a more meaningful dialogue.
We have all these kind of silences and loud voices in the recent history of Cyprus, and I suppose it's very painful, and nobody has a perfect plan of how to discuss about this. But because we're the second generation, if we don't start talking, our children will never discuss this history.
Living in a post-conflict society means that every side is trying to legitimize their own political views and aims through an official narrative, let's say. And this official narrative is, there is an effort to be transmitted through the educational systems. So if this is the effort, then what is the role of a teacher who is caught up in this situation? On the one hand, there is the pressure, let's say, from the official side to deliver something that is written as the truth in a textbook. And then you know that this can be actually incompatible with teaching up to the standards that you are aware of and believe in.
Tarih öğretimi ve resmi öğretimle ilgili muhakkak ki bizim vizyonumuzla bizi yönetenlerin vizyonu arasında ciddi fark vardır. Bizi yönetenler ayrılığı hep ön plana çıkardıklarından dolayı eğitim sisteminde ayrılıkçı unsurların, nationalist unsurların ve şovenist unsurların olmasını istiyorlar. Aksi takdirde kendisi ortadan kalkacak, kendisine destek veren kesim olmayacak. Benim için değil, muhakkak ki bana zor gelir ama genç nesillerine de bu gibi gerici, beyin yıkayıcı anlayışların, yanlışların öğretilmesi, onların hayat boyunca bir Rum'u bir düşman olarak görmesi, nefret etmesi doğru şeyler değil.
Είναι αρκετά τραγικό καθημερινά να έρχεσαι στο σχολείο και να αποτελεί σύνορο της ίδιας σου της πατρίδας. Στον πάνω όροφο του σχολείου ήδη υπάρχουν οχυρωματικά έργα και μπορεί κανείς να δει κατάλοιπα ακόμα και από τις πολεμίστρες. Στη δυτική πλευρά του σχολείου είναι Ηνωμένα Έθνη και απέναντι βλέπουμε και τον Τούρκο κατακτήτη, τους στρατιώτες. Είναι πάρα πολλοί παράγοντες που επηρεάζουν το έργο μας. Έρχονται τα παιδιά ήδη, δυστυχώς φορτωμένα από την οικογένεια τους, από την κοινωνία, από το ευρύτερο περιβάλλον μέσα στο οποίο ζουν, ήδη με κατευθυνόμενη σκέψη. Και εμείς ακριβώς αυτό που προσπαθούμε να τους πείσουμε είναι να αφήσουν τον εαυτό τους να σκεφτεί ελεύθερα και μετά να κάνουν ήδη τις δικές τους επιλογές. Το θέμα δεν είναι να δούμε ποιος έχει φταίξει περισσότερο ή λιγότερο, αλλά πώς μπορώ να πω σε έναν παιδί που είναι εγγονός ενός παππού αγνοούμενου. Ξέχασε. Τώρα πια προχωρούμε μπροστά. Ναι, μην είσαι φανατισμένος. Θέλουμε την επανένωση της πατρίδας μας, αλλά αλίμονο δεν πρέπει να γνωρίσει το πατρικό σπίτι της μάνας ή του πατέρα. Δεν πρέπει να είναι τα σπίτια μας τα οποία είναι κατακτημένα. Αυτό είναι μια πραγματικότητα. Δεν πρέπει να την παραγράψουμε, αλλά μέσα σε ένα άλλο πνεύμα, με μια άλλη προσέγγιση. Γιατί έδωσαν το αίμα, τη ζωή τους, τα νιάτα τους, για ό,τι πολυτιμότερο υπάρχει, τη λευτεριά. Και σήμερα η πατρίδα μας εμάσει, στάζει αίμα, γιατί όλους αυτούς τους προδώσαμε εμείς και το όνειρό τους το πνίξαμε μέσα σε ίντρικες και διχόνοιες, ώστε σήμερα να μην μπορούμε ταυτόχρονα να γιορτάζουμε στον Απόστολο Ανδρέα και στη Μόρφου και να τους λέμε ναι, εσείς καήκατε στο μαχαιρά, όμως εμείς γίναμε καλύτεροι από εσάς και κρατήσαμε σαν φυλαχτό τη λευτεριά. Δυστυχώς τη μαγαρίσαμε και την προδώσαμε.
Some say invasion for 1974. Of course they have the right to say it because they feel like this. Some says, okay, it was a peace operation because you were saved, whatever. But they are sincere in expressing this. The problem is the dominant group try to say that there is only one eternal absolute truth and this is this narrative or account and you should all accept this version of it and there is nothing else.
If you think of knowledge as something there, as something static, not adherent to change, then you cannot accept change. Our aim as an association isn't to try to impose a different narrative, but just to help people engage in dialogue so they can respect the differences and discuss and debate and be more sensitive to the perspective of the other. This is a great luxury. Not everybody can afford it in Cyprus. Be in the same room with other educators and exchange points of view. This is unique.
The United Nations has been here in Cyprus since 1964, so we're approaching the 47th anniversary, in fact. It's actually the third longest standing mission, second to our peacekeeping operation in the Middle East, and that's in Kashmir. So we've been here for quite a long time. Now our chief task is to monitor the stability and the status quo in the buffer zone. Where we're standing now, along this street here, this was once a bustling city in Nicosia where Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots mixed. Now it's quite empty. It's remained that way since 1974 when the actual buffer zone was delineated. Since then, things have become more or less frozen in time, as you'll see around. These are once shops which had lots of business. Now it's empty.
The buffer zone is a very complicated place in which to keep the peace because there was never any ceasefire agreement as such, just a cessation of hostilities. This is one of the only places in the world where there are two opposing forces opposite each other that don't have any contact at all. We're in one of the most evocative parts of the buffer zone here. This is the old international airport. Since 1974, it has been in a time warp. Nothing here has changed. So it really is a reflection of the fact that the situation here in Cyprus is an anachronism. And as far as the opposing forces are concerned, the buffer zone is a no man's land between two ceasefire lines. So any initiative that takes place in the buffer zone is, by its nature, going to be complicated.
After 1964, it essentially became the demilitarized zone, but it's actually very militarized to the sense that you don't realize that there are lines that you're crossing that belong to one military force or another. We're taking a piece of this territory that's become very politicized and very militarized and defined by security and control, and reclaiming it for civic use. It's something that has been an idea generated by a really truly independent grassroots initiative that's come and transformed a building like this into a home for cooperation.
What we are trying to do is to establish a space where people can bring their questions and try to find answers in a more comprehensive way. We are not imposing any answer to anybody, but we are creating a space for dialogue. We are creating a space where resources from various sources will be gathered.
The fact that the archive is in the buffer zone in the home of cooperation is on neutral grounds, which makes it accessible to both sides, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. So there is no political connotation to actually going there and doing research. It is simply a way of accessing information and nothing more than that.
I think we're making more inroads into helping these official histories decay. We haven't made them collapse, and you can't expect us to make them collapse overnight either. But more historians interested in Cyprus are working to break down brick by brick, if necessary, the prevailing abuse of history on the island. And the Home for Cooperation, again, we can't expect miracles from a Home for Cooperation, but it's a space that can contribute to the work of people who are interested in searching for a more objective historical truth.
Τίποτα δεν ξέρω. Ο Κώστας 40 χρονών πόσο θέλει να τον ρωτήσεις, ούτε ιδέα είναι να μπορεί γίνει. Δεν ξέρει κανένας. Εμείς είμαστε η τελευταία γενιά των 70. Τελευταία γενιά είμαστε εμείς που ξέρουμε τον. Άμα να καπού και εμείς, σαν κοινωνία μπορούμε να επανέλθουμε. Γιατί να μην έχουμε.
Bir tanem son mektubunda başım sızlıyor. Yüreğim sersem diyorsun. Seni asarlarsa, seni kaybedersem diyorsun. Yaşayamam. Yaşarsın karıcığım. Hatıram deli bir rüzgar gibi dağılır havada. Yaşarsın kalbimin kızıl saçlı bacısı. Çünkü 20. yüzyıllarda ancak bir yıl sürer ölüm acısı.
Το βράχο του η θάλασσα, όλα καιρό τον βρέχει. Γι' αυτό τη στέλνω